Hello everyone, welcome to my second monthly movie review roundup, the video series where I review all the films I've seen in the past month. So let's start with the most recent film I watched, which was Todd Field's Tar, starring Cate Blanchett in the titular role. So the plot summary goes as follows. Set in the international world of Western classical music, the film centers on Lydia Tarr, widely considered one of the greatest living composer-conductors and the very first female director of a major German orchestra. So not a lot is really given away there. I didn't really know much about this film going in. I'd heard a lot of praise for it. Overall, I would say it's a very well-made film, very well directed. The cinematography is very good. Cate Blanchett was amazing. She's probably the best actress alive. She's proven that time and again. I think this is one of those cases where you can acknowledge a film is very good objectively, but you don't necessarily have to like it very much personally. The basic gist of this film is that Lydia Tarr is a composer who is really up there in her sphere, where the kind of world that she lives in. People aspire to be like her. Her word is gospel, and the entire first hour of the film sometimes feels like an entire ego trip for this character. A showcase of her incredible intelligence, her bravado, her charisma. Don't you just want to be like her? But then things start to unravel. Like an onion, the layers are slowly peeled off. You start to see she might not be all that she's cracked up to be. It turns out behind the scenes she's been up to a few dodgy things with members of her orchestra. She's a bit of a phony, like her real name isn't actually exotic like Lydia Tarr. And slowly things start to unravel with the world around Lydia closing in. I mean, it's one of those cases where a film is really hyped up by quote unquote the highbrow film critics. The film was praised heavily by Martin Scorsese, and my expectations of the film didn't affect it because, like I said, I thought it was a good movie. But I would have probably enjoyed this a lot more if it was just some random film I found on TV. And part of my issue with it is that I just thought it was alright because the things we saw in this film we've seen before. It didn't really add anything new to the table. It was well made. The world kind of feels a bit cold and clinical. It ticks all the boxes, music, cinematography, acting, all of that. But it's just that, I just thought, well, I've kind of been here before. I really like Todd Field's Little Children, and I thought we might be getting something, that'll make me feel something. Maybe that's the issue. I didn't really feel much from this film. It's quite pretentious, intentionally so. That's part of the point. Like I mentioned, the first hour is bigging up this character before she's dragged back down. But all in all, it was a decent film, 7 out of 10. It's worth watching if you're, a hardcore Cate Blanchett fan. But aside from her brilliant performance, there's not a lot else that I really got from this film. The next film on my list is Gloria, released in 1980 and directed by John Cassavetes. This is my first Cassavetes film. He's one of the more well-known film directors who's actually evaded me, and I've never seen a film of his before Gloria. And from what I understand, it's perhaps considered by many to be his most accessible work. It's his most kind of mainstream Hollywoodish movie, and in some ways it's kind of dismissed by some of his more hardcore fans. The summary of the story goes as follows. When a young boy's family is killed by the mob, their tough neighbor Gloria becomes his reluctant guardian. In possession of a book that the gangsters want, the pair go on the run in New York. In some ways, it's kind of like a precursor to Luc Besson's Leon the Professional, another film where a young kid's entire family is wiped out and somebody else takes guardianship. The opening scene of this film is very unsettling. It just kind of throws you into this situation where this family is at home in their apartment. They're all tense and nervous, and you're kind of piecing together the story that this guy is a mob lawyer or something, the father of the family. And he's got his kids in the apartment, he's got his wife there, he's got his mother-in-law there. There's all sorts of shady people hanging around on the stairs on the hotel ground floor. And long story short, all of them end up dead except one little kid. And it's pretty horrific. Gina Rowlands gives a magnificent performance as this neighbor who takes on the kid. She doesn't want anything to do with him initially. And over the course of the film, we start to piece more and more about her. that she's not just some random neighbor. She is also mobbed up. She used to be the girlfriend of some big-time gangster, and so she knows this world. She's streetwise. She knows the ins and outs of that kind of gangster lifestyle. She knows all the tricks of the trade. And Roland's really carried herself as someone who you don't doubt that she's been in that world and that she's seen some things and she's walked and talked with some people. The kid, some people might find annoying. He was a bit stiff, but I mean, kids can be stiff, can't they? I mean, he's playing someone whose entire family just died. He's not exactly going to be normal, is he? But I liked him. I thought he was cute. And their chemistry and their bond does develop over the course of the film, and it is quite sweet. It's one of those films, on the run from the bad guys, going across town, and the city plays a big part. It feels a kind of really quintessential, gritty, I mean, obviously it's 1980s, but it feels like one of those late 70s films. Lots of going in and out of taxis and the car honkings and greasy, dirty hotel rooms at night and going on and off of train stations. The performance by the actress who plays Gloria and the kind of retro, gritty feel of the film, those are probably the two main reasons why you might watch this film. It also does feel like all bets are off. I mean, you've seen an entire family wiped out in the opening scene, so the kid's life is in genuine danger. It's not one of those films where you think, oh, well, it's all going to be all right in the end. No, he could very well die. She could very well die. And so that constant tension is there. And I don't know what its reputation is among Cassavetes fans. I need to see more films of his to see what I think of Gloria in relation to his other films. But I liked it. I thought it was good. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. The next film I've seen is probably a film these days, I guess, you'd rather study in film school or something rather than just watch for entertainment. It's Knife in the Water. This was Roman Polanski's first big film. It's the film that made him a star. It's his only film that he made in Polish, if I remember correctly, before he moved to Hollywood and started making films in English. Knife in the Water follows this couple who are driving on the way to their yacht, and they pick up this young hitchhiker. And the husband convinces the young hitchhiker, who's also a man, to come with them and just to enjoy this little day trip while they sail on some lake or something and come back. But over the course of the film, and it's very subtle, this is not a film drenched in sensationalism or anything like that. If it was made today, you can imagine it being a lot more over the top, a lot more direct, and probably ending in some big, huge fight. But over the course of the film, antagonism between the two men grows. They seem to be trying to one-up each other. He wants to show his manhood, then the other one wants to show his manhood. He wants to do something where he exerts kind of power, and then the other one will try to exert power. And it's often a different kind of power. The older man, he has the know-how, he has the experience of the yacht and sailing, he knows all about that kind of stuff, so his power is more dominant and it's more assertive and it's more direct. The younger man, his kind of dick-waving is more passive-aggressive, is more subtle, there's little digs, and a lot of it relates to the wife, the woman, and she, in some ways, she actually halts the inevitable conclusion of different fights that these men have. For example, there's one scene where the young guy is sailing because he wants to go back, and the older guy has done something to the boat where the younger guy doesn't realize, but they're just going round and round in circles. And when he realizes, he gets angry, and the young man throws the paddle off the boat. Now, the older guy gets angry and he starts saying to him, "Go and get it." The younger guy says, "Well, I can't swim. You get it." So now we're at an impasse. So what's going to happen? Who is going to swallow their pride? Who's going to lower their ego? Is the older man going to get it? Is he going to punch the guy? What's going to happen? But then the lady suddenly jumps in the water and she gets it. So the situation is now dissipated. The tension is lowered and everything's more peaceful. And then the next situation kicks along. It's a good film. I'd recommend it to Polanski completionists. If you want to watch a low-key film about two guys having a power play, a subtle film where you have to keep your eyes open and peeled on the little things that are going on behind the scenes, then definitely it's worth a watch, and I had a good time with it. The next film on my list is called House of Long Shadows. Now, this is an interesting one. This was made in 1983, And the plot summary says, an American writer goes to a remote Welsh manor on a $20,000 bet. Can he write a classic novel in 24 hours? Upon his arrival, however, the writer discovers that the manor, thought empty, actually has several rather odd inhabitants. Now, what this film is known for, and I say known for, it's not really a well-known film. I had never heard of it before. I just saw it randomly pop up on TV. This is the only film in which horror movie legends Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Vincent Price starred in together and shared the screen together. In fact, they're in it together a lot. And those three names are huge. I've seen a lot of Hammer horror films. I've seen a lot of Roger Corman's old horror films from the 60s. And these guys were always popping up here and there. And to see them all together makes the film worth watching, even if it isn't good. Now, is it good? Well, it didn't get very good reviews. It is one of those where the story doesn't really make sense if you look too deep into it, and you can tear it apart. But I have to be honest, and maybe it's a little embarrassing to say because the film doesn't seem to have a very good reputation. I actually enjoyed this film and I had a really good time with it. I had a lot of fun with it. Of course, most of that stems from the fact that you're watching Cushing, Price, and Lee on screen and play off one another, and each of them really shows up. They're doing their business. They are on form. And there were twists and turns in the story that I actually found really interesting, and they actually caught me out, because the writer goes to this supposedly empty house in Wales, and he's made a bet with his agent or producer or whatever that he'll be able to complete a novel in 24 hours. And all of a sudden some caretakers show up, even though our writer phones up the producer and he says there are no caretakers at the house. Some lady shows up saying that he's in grave danger and you need to leave this house at once. And you start to suspect, and then the character suspects that, oh, this is all just a hoax. The producer's trying to put me off and waste my time so I won't complete the book and he'll win the bet. But then you do get sucked in by the story, because one by one, 3 people arrive, Cushing, Lee, and Price. They arrive into the house. And the story is basically that these people are all here for some kind of family reunion, and the writer gets sucked into it, and it turns out that what's happened is that a long time ago a relative of this family did something terrible, murdered a young girl, and so they locked him up in some high tower or something in this manor, and today is the day when he gets released. And later on we find out, when they go upstairs to release him, that he's escaped, that he's on the loose, and now he wants revenge against his family members who locked him up all those years ago. And so that's the basic gist of the premise. The only one of these visitors who isn't involved is the guy who Christopher Lee plays, who is actually the new owner of the home, who's thinking just like our writer, who are all these people, what's going on here? But just like the writer, he gets sucked into the story. Now, spoilers here, but what ends up actually happening is that the guy who Lee plays is actually the escaped guy. He was the guy who was in the room. He must have freed himself, come around the back, come into the front door, and just pretended he was the new owner of the home. But what happens is he one by one picks off all the family members, and he goes after the writer. He's fighting him and everything, and then the writer manages to knock him off. And once it seems like everybody's died, the villain Lee has died, and the writer and the girl have survived, everybody kind of gets up and starts clapping or whatever, and it's revealed that it was actually an elaborate hoax. It doesn't quite work, there's some things that don't really make sense. Like Lee, in one scene, was actually strangling the writer. He was clearly, and then he pretends to die. And then Lee leaves him alone. But how is this all part of the game? How would that work? And then the writer, he wakes up and then he, punches Lee or whatever. It doesn't really work. That's the main gist of it. If you think too hard about it, it doesn't work. But it was a lot of fun. It did have a few twists, a few reveals. You think, oh, that's the story. But then it throws in another curveball and then another curveball. But all in all, I had a really good time with it. I thought it was a really enjoyable film. And the ending was really good as well, because once it's revealed that all of this was fake, it was all a charade, the actors are just all like sitting around kind of having a dinner meal together, and they're all complimenting each other. Like you see Lee and Price, and they're talking and they're saying, "Oh, I loved you in this film. I loved you in that film." Obviously, not as the actual actors, as the characters, but it feels like the movie is a send off for these actors, because it kind of is. It feels like, films like The Irishman, where they intentionally get all these legends in one film, and the film acts like a kind of swan song for them. So in that regard, the film is very much worth watching. And even as just a piece of entertainment, if you're a fan of these horror films, these kind of oldie Hammer horror films, and these Giallos and Mario Bava's films, Roger Corman's horror films, and definitely this does belong on the watch list, I believe. Speaking of horror, not a movie, but I checked out The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix show, made by Mike Flanagan. I was really curious about this show because it had been getting heaps and heaps of praise, and I just kind of thought to myself, well, it's a 10-episode adaptation of Shirley Jackson's horror novel. Can it really be that good? Can a haunted house movie stretched into 10 episodes really be that good? But after watching it, I have to say, I mean, yeah, maybe there is an element where it didn't need to be that long, 10 episodes at about 1 hour each. But it was good. It was really good. I mean, it really punched above its weight. It didn't settle for just being a spooky old haunted house series where things go and jump scares every 2 minutes. I mean, there are jump scares, but the series doesn't rely on them. They are an organic part of the story, and there's even specific reasons why certain jump scares happen. A lot of the horror is explained. It doesn't take away from the horror, but things don't just happen haphazardly and randomly and arbitrary. They have reasons for happening. But going back to punching above its weight, The Haunting of Hill House, it feels like, a show that said, you know what, we're not going to just settle, we're going to take this premise and we're going to really go to town with it. We're going to expand it. We're going to do other things with it that others haven't tried before. Because really, it's not even a haunted house series. It's more so a series about grief, about childhood trauma, about fractured family relationships, about past coming back to haunt you, or literally, about letting go, about moving on, all of these kind of things. The series jumps from a timeline in the future and a timeline in the past when the family, most of them were all kids, and in the future where they are all adults. And yeah, you could argue that the series wouldn't be anywhere near as interesting if it was told in a linear fashion. Part of the reason why you're watching is because you want to know what happened at the house all those years ago, and the series drip feeds it to you until obviously by the time you're done with it, everything is explained. But like I said, it really does punch above its weight. I mean, putting aside the story and all the stuff about the family and the trauma and the past and the really great writing, even just on a technical level, the cinematography is fantastic. There's the way they pulled off certain shots and things like, the camera weaving in and around the house, and then the camera will go back to things we've already seen, but things are different. Statues are looking the other way. And if you look at behind the scenes footage, it did involve a very old school method of people running around in the background on the set, trying to move things around. And some of the things they achieved, like characters being in one timeline and then moving into the past timeline, or maybe it's a dream or a fantasy, whatever, but in a continuous, unbroken shot. It's really, really good stuff. And all of the different elements really make the show add up to something that, some might call a masterpiece. Having seen it, it is definitely up there. I only really ever had one major problem with the show, and that was the ending of it. So obviously spoilers here. And without going too deep into it, the show kind of felt like it was gearing up for, a kind of shocking, depressing ending where things end badly for the family. Because the kind of gist is, the house wants to claim all the family members. It wants to bring them back to the house so it can devour them. And then their souls or whatever are trapped there. They become ghosts that hang around. There's ghosts that have been there for yonks. And the mother goes a bit deranged. She dies in the house. One of the daughters dies, and her death kind of kickstarts the entire story. The father ends up actually dying. So these guys all kind of trapped in the house. Now my issue is that the house is always kind of seen as evil, that it is hungry and it wants to take these family members and they must stay away. And the mentality from the kids in the family towards the house seemed to change in the final episode. It just didn't sit right with me the way the show ended. Again, I don't want to go too deep into it because then I'd have to explain so many different things. But like, for example, one of the daughters who died, she was clearly in great pain. You can tell this because when she's coming and going in the visions and minds of the other siblings, she's screaming and whatnot. You can see, okay, the ghost is in pain. You know, she's not in a happy state. And the fact that she's died, the fact that she's been killed by the house, the fact that she was brainwashed and seduced by the house to come back, these are not good things, yeah? The house is the villain, the house is the bad guy. But things changed in the final episode where it was almost like it was a good thing to die in this house. It became something that, oh, well, at least the people, when they die, their spirits will live on in this house. And, you know, maybe sometimes we can come and see them. It was so bizarre that it almost derailed the entire build-up to this climax. Because isn't that the kind of ending that a deluded character would think was a good one? That, oh, you know, I'm gonna die, but at least I'll stay here forever as a ghost. But most ghost films, even children, family ghost films, isn't the whole concept of them being a ghost that they've got unfinished business and that a true happy ending means they can move on and their soul rests in peace? In fact, I actually wrote a post about this on some social media platform. This is what I had to say about the ending. It felt like a tacked on happy ending favouring reconciliation, but felt like it was just going against the feel of the rest of the series. Just a lot of things don't add up. This house feeds on people, has killed many people. But now all of a sudden, it's a warm and gooey thing for your loved one to die in the house so that their ghost can spend eternity floating around the house. To such an extent, the housekeeper rushes to the house to ensure his wife dies there so she remains forever as a spectre. But who's to say she wouldn't come back troubled and in pain? And doesn't it bring up questions about life after death in the sense that the house is keeping the souls of these people? And that means it's stopping them from crossing over or whatever happens after you die in this universe. So wouldn't the best thing to do, as was suggested by some characters, to burn the whole thing down, to do the difficult thing but the righteous thing so the souls can move on? So obviously you won't be seeing the ghost of your dad anymore or anything like that, but he'll be in a better place because the house will be destroyed and they can move on. It feels like it goes against the entire ethos of the show, the idea of letting go, of moving on, of putting grief past you. Instead, characters are unable to let go and some actively kill themselves to be with their dead loved ones in the house. Telling Steve was one of the kids, not to sell the house doesn't guarantee anything. So Steve's father, who died and he's a ghost now, he tells Steve that he's kind of the new keeper of the house, that he has to make sure no one messes with it. He could snuff it tomorrow and the deed moves to another person, or some hobo might come along and make a home for himself in one of the living rooms and then get devoured by the house. Burn it down. Let the ghosts have peace and move past your grief. Then there's Nell's monologue in the Red Room. Nell is the girl who died, and I've got quite a few problems with how her storyline ended. Her monologue in the Red Room, which seems to serve the purpose of clearing up plot inconveniences. Like, for example, she looked in pain throughout the show when she was a ghost, but then there's a line where she says in the Red Room, "I feel more free now." And she becomes a ghost known as the Bent Neck Lady, who the younger version of Nellie, when she's a kid, she sees her at random times. And one question I had is, why did the Bent Neck Lady show up at those particular random times? Is this the house playing tricks on the young Nell? Did the house know the future? And, so many questions arise. And she had a line where she said, "I thought time was linear, but it's not." Just randomly, it just feels like it was clearing up plot inconveniences. It's like the ending of The Shining, only if the house claiming Jack was played as a warm and beautiful moment. I suppose it could work if the show treated it as a kind of compromise with the house. A kind of, okay, you've murdered many of my loved ones, but I'm going to make the best of the situation. But I didn't get that feeling at all. It feels to me like the house won. So that's my thoughts on the ending. And the ending, like I said, didn't sit right with me at all. And lo and behold, I ended up finding out that Mike Flanagan actually had an ending planned where the house did win, where all the characters, the parents and the children and everything, something like they'd be in they'd be together, they'd be talking. Finally, the family has reconciled. Everybody's happy with each other, and the camera moves out to reveal they're still in the red room in the house. They're all deluded, and the house has actually won. But what ended, and obviously you could say, yeah, okay, that's cliche ending, another ending where, surprise, surprise, the bad guy wins, the ghost win, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, that would have fitted with where the story was going. Now, apparently, Mike Flanagan has said in an interview that literally on the day of shooting or the day before shooting the ending, he changed his mind because he fell too in love with his characters and he wanted to give them a happy ending. So, I mean, good for him, I guess, but I guess there was a reason why the ending of the series didn't sit right with me, because that wasn't what the ending was supposed to be. And the original ending, I think, would have gelled and clicked better than what we ended up getting. But still, this is a brilliant TV show. I mean, you can't even really call it, like a horror limited series, because that doesn't do it justice. It's so much more. I mean, I was more interested in the family drama and the dynamics and all of that kind of stuff. In some ways, the horror stuff, because I've never really been a guy big on jump scares and all of that. The horror stuff got in the way. And I was like, let's get this scene set at night where something is banging and all that. Let's get this over and done with so we can move on to the dynamics between the siblings and the parents and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it is really good, and it did live up to all the hype. Another film I watched was The Power of the Dog, starring Jesse Plemons and Benedict Cumberbatch. This was a recent film that, got a lot of hype surrounding it. I think it won 1 or 2 Oscars. It was one of the front runners for Best Picture. Western, I love Westerns. So I watched the film, and it's basically about, these 2 brothers. One of them's, like a mellow fellow, played by Jesse Plemons. And the other one, played by Cumberbatch, is a very gruff fella, very mean-spirited, proper man's man, as you might say. And when Plemons' character marries a woman who's already got a son, and he's quite a kind of... today they'd probably call him a soy boy. He's kind of one of those kind of guys, very skinny, he likes making these kind of flower arrangements. He's what Cumberbatch character would, think of as a sissy, a man up, that was one of those kind of relationships. And Cumberbatch's character basically, the film's synopsis and everything says that he torments the Jesse Plemons' wife and son. I wouldn't really go that far. He was bad. He wasn't very nice at all. There's psychological things going on that he's doing to torment the pair of them. It wasn't that bad though. I think they could have, gone a bit further with that. But that's kind of the basic story, that, there's this awkward family dynamic between all of these guys. Cumberbatch's character enjoys being filthy, he takes it as a piece of pride, when he likes being difficult, likes being different, doesn't like being amongst these clean people. So you've got the rough, tough, gruff cowboy, and you've got the skinny little teenager. And it was kind of interesting for about an hour. But then something happened which kind of made me think, oh, is it this again? And it turns out that the young kid, he finds basically some gay porno mags that the older gruff character played by Cumberbatch has been hiding. And so it turns out that, oh, okay, so it's one of those stories where the big tough guy is actually gay himself, and he's overcompensating and he's insecure and all of that kind of stuff. And the rest of the film pretty much deals with that right up until the very end, which I'll speak about in a minute. But that's the kind of main thing about the film, and I just kind of thought, oh, haven't we been here before? We've seen this so many times. If this was made in the late 60s or something, it would have been seen as, provocative and, oh man, oh, ooh. At the time where guys like Clint Eastwood were, in their prime, the John Waynes were, waning out. And to have this story where the big tough cowboy actually is really like this on the inside and no one knows, and that's the reason why he's projecting and calling everybody this, that, and he's going around acting like this, and oh man. But the thing is, we've seen this so many times now. It's such an old tired cliche of the big bad bully man being actually batting for the other side and no one realizing it, and him not being able to come to terms with the way he feels. Is it really something that boundary pushing? Because the first half of the film I felt was more interesting, with him. How is this going to end? What will the wife do? What will the brother turn on his brother? You can feel that he's kind of scared of him. Will the son do something? How does this end? How does this family dynamic reconcile? But then it just became, he's gay on the inside, and the whole film just swerved and went in that direction. And like I said, right up to the very end, because at the end, spoiler alert, what happens is the young kid actually poisons, and nobody knows this, he poisons Benedict Cumberbatch's character. And this allows his mother, who had been driven to alcoholism because of Cumberbatch's behaviour, to basically live a free and happy marriage with Jesse Plemons, and the son has freedom as well. This is after a period where you thought that maybe the son and the Cumberbatch character, and they may have started a romantic relationship of some sort. And unbeknownst to Cumberbatch, even though they're having this clandestine relationship, the younger guy was planning to kill him all that time. And there's a very strange shot which ends the film where you see the kid looking down from his window at the mother and father, Jesse Plemons, and his wife, and they're all happy and everything, and the camera moves out and it shows him, and the film ends, and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be feeling here. Is this a good thing? Is that what the film is saying? Is it some kind of political commentary that we need to get rid of all these toxic men so that, the more normal, civilized men and women can live happily? Because it was a bit of a curveball, It swerved in the last 10 minutes, and I felt like, well, hold on, I want to be watching this film. What happens after this? Is the kid a hero? Is he a villain? What am I supposed to be feeling? And I can't help but feel that if the mother is that easily driven to alcoholism, then maybe Cumberbatch isn't actually the primary problem here for the wife. What if something happens in the future? Who are they going to blame then for her alcoholism? So it's kind of a weird one. There's not a lot really going on. Okay, so, this guy's gay and he's got insecurity issues. But come on, we need more meat to this film. Like I said, it isn't the 60s anymore. You can't just leave it there at that. Give us something more. They gave us that something more right at the very end, and then the film finishes. So it's like, what? So I kind of took it to be a kind of 5 out of 10 kind of film for me. The final film, the one I watched right at the beginning of this month, I don't actually remember much about it, even though I really enjoyed it. It's a film released in 1971 called Demons, and it was directed by Toshio Matsumoto. The story goes that after being robbed by a geisha, a Ronin warrior carves a bloody path to seek revenge. Now, it might sound like a staple run-of-the-mill samurai film, but it really isn't. In fact, when I watched it, I wish they didn't use that plot summary on the internet, because the geisha betraying the Ronin is not something that happens like in the first 10 minutes or something. It happens quite a while later, and it does feel like the film wants you to suspect that she's betraying him. So it would have been better not to have known that. But yeah, I mean, story-wise, I guess that is what happens. She betrays him, and then he wants to get revenge. It's one of those films where the more you watch it, the more of different characters' motivations are revealed. So I'm not saying the geisha and her husband, because she ends up actually being married, even though she was seducing the Ronin, acting as if he was the only love in her life and all that kind of stuff. It turned out she pretended she was going to be sold to some scary baron or something, so the Ronin, ended up paying for her release. And so her and the husband just take that money, they dish it out to the other people who played a part in this scheme. But, it's one of those films where, they had their reasons for doing what they did. And as the Ronin seeks revenge, the film gets more and more bloody and more traumatic. I mean, even a baby gets stabbed in this film. Pretty horrific. There's something quite bleak about this film. It's very psychological, it's very philosophical, and it uses a very interesting technique that guys like Tarantino ended up popularizing and stuff, which I think we can call dual reality, where a scene will play out with the way the main character, the Ronin, imagines it will play out. But then it plays out how it actually plays out, which is completely different, whether it be a fight, whether it be a confrontation or something. And it's used to good effect. It can be quite shocking. It keeps you on your toes. You're not quite sure what to expect, what's happened, what hasn't happened. And there's a lot of replaying of the same shot, sometimes from different angles. And it's just a very technically well-made film. Very good looking as well. It feels very claustrophobic, a very dark film. You hardly ever see, I think there's one scene in the film that's in daylight. The rest of it is all dark, set during the pitch black outside, or inside these kind of small homes that the Ronin and the geisha and whatnot live in. I mean, if I was to describe what this film is like, I mean, it's not really a samurai film. I mean, it is, but if you say that, people just imagine ching 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 every 2 minutes. It's not really a horror film. It's not like Kwai-den or any of these kind of films. It's more like, I guess you could say samurai film noir. That might be the best way to describe it. It belongs in that category of films such as Samurai Rebellion and Harakiri. Harakiri is obviously the best example of this kind of film. Cautionary tales, examinations of human greed and lack of empathy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's on another tier of filmmaking from all the other films I've seen in this video. Definitely the best of the bunch and an awesome revenge film. So, have you guys seen any of the films that I've listed in this video today? If you have, let me know what you think of them down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.